Jessica Torres never imagined she'd be sleeping in her car with her 7-year-old daughter in a Walmart parking lot in December. But that's exactly where they were when the email arrived about the abandoned research station in Alaska selling for emptied, because nobody wanted it. What she found buried deep in the glacier ice wasn't just frozen, it was 318 million, and a secret that would either save her family or bury them forever. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The heater in Jessica's 2008 Honda Civic had stopped working 3 days ago. She'd stuffed towels around the windows to keep the cold out. But Montana winters didn't care about towels or desperation, or 7-year-old girls named Sophie, who deserved so much better than this. "Mama, I'm cold," Sophie whispered, her breath visible even inside the car. Jessica pulled her daughter closer, wrapping both of their bodies in the sleeping bags she'd bought at Goodwill. "I know, baby. Just a little longer. We'll figure something out." But Jessica didn't know how. 3 months ago, her ex-husband Derek had done the unthinkable. He'd transferred their house into his girlfriend's name, emptied their joint account, and filed papers claiming Jessica had abandoned the marriage. By the time she'd scraped together money for a lawyer, it was too late. The judge, Derek's former college roommate, had ruled against her on every point. She'd lost the house, the savings, even her car had been repossessed. This Civic belonged to her co-worker Maria, who'd loaned it to her with tears in her eyes and no expectation of getting it back. Jessica's phone screen cracked. Battery at 12% buzzed with an email notification. She almost didn't check it. Email these days meant collection agencies and final notices and job rejections. But Sophie was asleep against her shoulder, and Jessica needed something to distract from the cold, seeping through her bones. The subject line read, Estate auction, 4472, Arctic properties. Jessica frowned. She'd been browsing government auction sites late one night, looking at properties she could never afford, dreaming of a life that felt increasingly impossible. She must have clicked something by accident. She opened the email. "Dear Ms. Torres, thank you for your inquiry regarding Lot 247, decommissioned Glacier Research Station, Chilkat Range, Alaska. The property remains available for purchase. Due to its remote location and deteriorated condition, the minimum bid is emptied. The station has no utilities, no road access, and requires helicopter transport. Structural integrity unknown. Buyer assumes all liability. If you wish to proceed, please respond within 48 hours. Regards, Federal Asset Recovery Division." Jessica read it twice. $800. She'd 247 in her pocket, everything she'd managed to save from 2 months of working double shifts at the diner, while living in this car. $800 would leave her with 447 for food, gas, and whatever came next. But a research station, even a broken one, even in Alaska, it was shelter. It was something Derek's lawyers couldn't touch because he didn't even know about it. It was a chance. Her fingers were shaking from cold, from exhaustion, from the absolute insanity of what she was considering as she typed her response. "I would like to proceed with the purchase. How do I submit payment?" The reply came 30 minutes later with payment instructions and documents to sign. Jessica used the Walmart's Wi-Fi to complete the transaction, watching her bank account drop to 447,12 with a mix of terror and desperate hope. When it was done, she looked at Sophie sleeping peacefully, unaware that her mother had just bet their last dollars on a frozen building she'd never seen, in a place she'd never been, with no plan for how they'd even get there. "I hope I didn't just make the biggest mistake of my life," Jessica whispered. The woman at the Federal Asset Recovery Office in Seattle looked at Jessica like she'd lost her mind. "You actually paid for the Chilkat station?" She pulled up the file on her computer, eyebrows rising. "Nobody's touched that property in 15 years. You understand there's no power, no heat, no water." "I understand," Jessica said, holding Sophie's hand tightly. "How do we get there?" "Helicopter's the only way. The access road washed out in 2009. You'd need to charter one from Haynes. That'll run you about $2,000 each way." Jessica's stomach dropped. She had 447 after gas to get to Alaska. "Maybe, Trista. Is there any other way?" The woman considered her for a long moment, taking in Jessica's worn coat, Sophie's 2 small shoes, the desperation that must have been written across both their faces. "There's a supply helicopter that goes up once a month to check the weather stations in that range. They might let you hitch a ride if you ask nicely. The pilot's name is Tom Hendricks. He's based out of Haynes. Tell him Sandra sent you." Jessica felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Sandra said quietly. "That station was shut down for a reason. The glacier's been advancing. Last inspection showed significant ice damage to the structure. You might get up there and find it's not even habitable. It'll be more habitable than my car," Jessica said, before she could stop herself. Sandra's expression softened. She reached into her desk and pulled out a card. "My daughter runs a women's shelter in Seattle. If Alaska doesn't work out, it'll work out," Jessica interrupted. "It has to." The drive to Haynes took 4 days. Jessica drove in shifts, stopping only for gas and bathroom breaks at rest stops, where she'd let Sophie run around to burn energy. They ate peanut butter sandwiches and gas station bananas. They slept in the car in the parking lots of 24-hour grocery stores. Sophie didn't complain. She was 7 years old and had learned in the past 3 months that complaining didn't change anything. Instead, she played games on Jessica's phone when the battery allowed, drew pictures on the backs of old receipts, and asked questions about Alaska. "Will there be polar bears, Mama?" "Maybe. We'll have to be careful." "Will we have our own house again?" Jessica's throat tightened. "Yes, baby, we'll have our own place. Even if it's a frozen research station with no heat or power," she didn't add. "Even if I have no idea what we're getting into." Tom Hendricks was exactly what Jessica expected. Weathered, skeptical, and direct. "Sandra sent you." He looked at Jessica and Sophie standing in his hangar, their worldly possessions in 2 duffel bags and a backpack. "You're the one who bought the Chilkat station?" "Yes." He shook his head. "That place is a death trap. Glacier's been crushing it for years. Can you take us up there, or not?" Tom studied her for a long moment. "It'll cost you." "How much?" $500. Jessica's heart sank. She had 287 left. "I have 287. That won't even cover my fuel." Sophie tugged on Jessica's coat. "Mama, I'm hungry." Jessica knelt down, pulling out their last granola bar. "Here, baby." Tom watched this exchange, his weathered face unreadable. Finally, he sighed. 287, and you help me unload supplies at the other weather stations. Deal?" Jessica looked up at him, trying not to cry. "Deal." The helicopter ride took 90 minutes, flying over forests that gave way to mountains, that gave way to endless white. Sophie pressed her face against the window, watching the world transform into something alien and beautiful. Tom pointed to a cluster of buildings ahead. "That's the Chilkat Range Research Complex. Your station's the one on the right." As they approached, Jessica's hope began to crumble. The station was larger than she'd expected, a 3-story structure built into the side of a glacier. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. But it looked like the mountain was slowly eating it. Ice had pushed through the walls in several places. Windows were shattered. The roof sagged under the weight of snow. "Jesus," Tom muttered. "It's worse than last time I saw it." They landed on a relatively flat area, about 50 yards from the station. The moment the helicopter door opened, the cold hit like a physical force. It wasn't Montana cold. This was something else entirely. A cold that made Jessica's lungs hurt, that froze the moisture in her nose instantly. Tom helped them unload their bags. "I'll be back in 4 weeks for the supply run. If you want to leave before then, you'd need to radio for emergency evac. That'll cost you $5,000 minimum." "We'll be fine," Jessica said, with more confidence than she felt. Tom looked at Sophie, who was staring at the massive station with wide eyes. "There's emergency supplies in the storage room, batteries, MREs, water purification tablets. And ma'am?" Jessica looked to him. "That glacier's unstable. If you hear cracking or groaning, get out. Don't try to save anything. Just run." Then he was gone, the helicopter disappearing into the grey sky, leaving Jessica and Sophie alone, in the most remote place either of them had ever been. The silence was absolute. No cars, no voices, no hint of civilization, just wind and white and the creaking of ice somewhere deep within the glacier. "Come on, baby," Jessica said, picking up their bags. "Let's see our new home." The station's main door was unlocked, or rather, the lock had frozen and broken years ago. Jessica pushed it open, and they stepped into darkness. Her flashlight purchased at a gas station in Montana cut through the gloom, revealing a long corridor lined with doors. The floor was concrete, covered in a layer of ice. The walls were metal, condensation frozen into intricate patterns. "It's like a castle," Sophie whispered. "More like a tomb," Jessica thought but didn't say. They explored carefully. Most of the rooms were labs, filled with abandoned equipment and overturned furniture. The glacier had pushed through the east wall in several places, ice fingers reaching across rooms like the station was being slowly absorbed. But the west side was better. There was a common area with a kitchen that still had pots and pans hanging on racks. A dormitory with 8 small rooms, each with a bed and a desk. A storage room that, true to Tom's word, was stacked with supplies. Jessica found batteries for her flashlight. MREs dated from 5 years ago, but probably still safe. And most importantly, a generator and several jerry cans of fuel. "Please work," she whispered, priming the generator according to the faded instructions on its side. It carved, sputtered, and caught. Lights flickered on throughout the west wing, not all of them, but enough. Heat began flowing through vents, weak but present. Jessica sat down hard on the floor and cried. They had power, they had heat, they had food and shelter. Sophie sat beside her, small hand finding hers. "It's okay, Mama, we're safe now." Jessica pulled her daughter close. "Yeah, baby, we're safe." The first week was about survival. Jessica worked 16-hour days, making the station livable. She sealed broken windows with plastic sheeting and duct tape. She scrubbed years of grime from the kitchen. She dragged mattresses from the dormitory rooms into the common area, creating a nest near the heater vent. Sophie helped as best she could, organizing their supplies, setting up her drawings on the walls, making the cold metal space feel somehow more like home. At night, they'd lie together under every blanket they could find, and Jessica would tell stories about what they'd do when spring came. They'd explore. They'd figure out how to make money from the station. Scientists still needed research stations, didn't they? Maybe she could rent it out. Maybe they could grow something. Maybe. But deep down, Jessica knew they couldn't stay here forever. The generator fuel would run out. The MREs would run out. Winter in Alaska lasted 9 months. They had food for maybe 6 weeks. She'd bought them time, but time alone wouldn't save them. On the 8th day, Sophie was exploring the station, staying in the safe areas Jessica had marked with duct tape when she called out, "Mama, there's a door here." Jessica found her in one of the laboratory rooms, pointing to what looked like a solid wall of ice that had pushed through from the glacier. "That's just ice, baby." "No. Look." Sophie pointed more insistently. Jessica looked closer. Behind the ice, barely visible, there was indeed a door. Metal, built into the glacier itself. She could see hinges, a handle, covered in thick ice. "What is that?" Sophie asked. Jessica thought about the station's purpose. Climate research. Glacier studies. They would have needed access to the ice itself, wouldn't they? For drilling cores, taking samples. "It must lead into the glacier," she said. "Can we open it?" "I don't think we should, baby. It's probably dangerous." But over the next few days, Jessica found herself drawn back to that room, staring at the door. There was something odd about it. The ice around it wasn't random, it had been cut away, then reformed. Recently too, within the last few years, judging by the clarity, someone had opened this door. Someone had been inside. On the 12th night, while Sophie slept, Jessica made a decision. She took a hammer and chisel from the tool room and began carefully chipping away the ice. It took 3 hours. Her arms screamed. Her fingers went numb despite the gloves. But finally the door was clear. The handle was frozen solid. Jessica heated water on their camping stove and poured it over the mechanism. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th attempt, the handle turned. The door opened with a groan that echoed through the glacier, revealing a tunnel carved into the ice itself. LED, lights still functioning, somehow lined the walls, casting everything in blue. Jessica's heart pounded. This was professional work. Expensive. Recent. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped inside. The tunnel sloped downward, descending into the glacier. The walls were smooth, perfectly carved. Every 20 feet, there was a support arch, metal reinforcing the ice. Someone had spent serious money building this. After about 100 feet, the tunnel opened into a chamber. Jessica stopped breathing. The chamber was enormous, easily 50 feet across. The ice walls had been carved into shelves, and on those shelves sat plastic containers, dozens of them, hundreds. She approached the nearest shelf with shaking hands and opened the first container. Money. Stacks of $100 bills, sealed in plastic. She opened another container. More money. And another. Gold coins this time, gleaming in the LED light. Jessica's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the ice floor, flashlight beam, trembling across the chamber. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be real. But it was. Container after container, filled with cash, gold, bearer bonds, diamonds in small velvet bags. Someone had built a vault inside the glacier. Someone had filled it with a fortune, and then they'd abandoned it. Jessica didn't know how long she sat there. Time lost meaning in the blue light of the ice chamber. Finally, she forced herself to move, to think. She started counting containers, making notes on her phone. 40 containers of cash, 23 of gold coins, 15 of bearer bonds, 5 of diamonds and other stones. She opened random containers, making rough calculations. If each cash container held what the first one did, and they seemed to that was at least 200 million in currency alone, the gold would be worth another 60 million at current prices. The bonds, if they were still valid, could be worth 50 million more. The diamonds were harder to estimate, but, even conservatively, another 8 million, 318 million, give or take, hidden in a glacier, in Alaska. in a research station she'd bought for Oziemset. Jessica started laughing. Then she started crying. Then she was doing both, sitting on the ice floor of an impossible vault, while her daughter slept upstairs, unaware that their luck, their impossible, inexplicable luck, had finally turned. But even through the tears and laughter, a voice in the back of her mind was screaming a warning. Someone put this here. Someone built this vault. Someone might come back for it. And when they did, Jessica and Sophie would be standing between them and 318 million. Jessica spent the rest of the night photographing everything. Every container, every shelf, every detail of the vault. She used her phone until the battery died, then used the camera she found in the station's equipment room. She needed documentation, evidence, protection. As dawn broke, not that it made much difference in the perpetual twilight of Alaskan winter. Jessica sat in the common area, Sophie still sleeping, and tried to think clearly. The money was here. It was real. But why? She returned to the vault, searching more carefully this time. In the back corner, hidden behind the last row of containers, she found a weatherproof case. Inside was a laptop, and taped to its lid, an envelope, with a single word, written in shaky handwriting, "Finder." Jessica opened the envelope with trembling fingers. "If you're reading this, then I'm dead, and you've found what I've spent 12 years protecting. My name is Dr. James Whitmore. I was the chief scientist at the Chilkat research station from 2008 to 2015. This money isn't mine. It isn't yours either. It belongs to 0 families who were promised pensions that never came. It belongs to workers who gave their lives to Coastal Mining Corporation only to watch the executives loot the pension fund and declare bankruptcy. I discovered the theft in 2014 while consulting on an environmental impact study. The executives had moved the money through 17 shell companies, planning to leave it overseas for a few years before quietly retrieving it. But I was an expert in data recovery. I traced every dollar. I couldn't go to the authorities. The corporation had judges, politicians, enforcement agents in their pocket. Anyone I told would tip them off, and the money would disappear forever. So, I did what they never expected. I stole it back. Over 6 months, I moved the money through the same channels they'd used, converting it to cash and physical assets, transporting it here in small shipments disguised as research equipment. I built this vault into the Glacier, planning to hold it until I could find a way to return it safely. But they discovered what I'd done. In 2015, I had an accident during a routine Glacier survey. They thought they killed me. They were almost right. I survived, but barely. I've spent the last 9 years in hiding, too afraid to come back, too sick to finish what I started. The laptop contains everything you need. The list of families owed money, the proof of the theft, legal documentation I prepared, instructions for distribution. If you're desperate enough to be living in this station, I understand the temptation to keep this money. God knows I've thought about it during my darkest moments. But those families have been waiting 12 years for justice. Many are elderly, many are dying. They worked their entire lives for a promise that was stolen from them. Please, finish what I couldn't. The password is Glacier Justice 2015. Dr. James Whitmore. Jessica, read the letter 3 times. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the paper. 4,000 families, stolen pensions, a dying man's last attempt at justice, and she was sitting in the middle of it. She looked at Sophie, still sleeping peacefully, unaware that their desperate gamble on an Oceanset research station had just become something infinitely more complicated. 318 million could change their lives, could give Sophie everything: college, security, A future where she never had to sleep in a car, or go hungry, or watch her mother break apart from the weight of trying to keep them alive. But those families, workers who'd done nothing wrong, people who'd lost their retirements, while executives walked free. Jessica thought about Derek, about the judge who'd ruled against her, about the system that protected those with power and crushed people like her. She knew exactly what those families felt like. The laptop powered on, and Jessica entered the password. Files opened, revealing spreadsheets with names, addresses, amounts owed, legal documents, news articles about the coastal mining bankruptcy, testimony from workers who'd lost everything. One file was a video. Jessica clicked it. Dr. Whitmore appeared on screen. He was thin, grey-haired, with eyes that had seen too much suffering. "If you're watching this, then you found the vault," he said. "You probably have questions. You're probably scared. You should be." Coastal Mining was acquired by Denali Development Corporation in 2016. They've spent the last 8 years searching for this money. They know it's somewhere in Alaska. They know I was involved. They just never figured out where I hid it. He paused, coughing deep, wet coughs that spoke of serious illness. They have resources. They have connections. If they find out you have the money, they will come after you. They will use every legal tool, every threat, every pressure point. They will make your life hell until you give it up. Jessica's blood ran cold. "But here's what they don't know," Whitmore continued. "I didn't just steal the money. I gathered evidence, recorded conversations, documented bribes. Everything you need to destroy them is in the legal folder on this laptop. If they come after you, you go public with everything. You burn them to the ground." He smiled weakly. "It's mutually assured destruction. The only reason they haven't killed me is because they don't know who else has copies of the evidence. You keep that ambiguity alive, you stay safe." The video ended. Jessica sat back, mind reeling. She had 318 million in a Glacier vault. She had evidence of corporate crime. She had a way to help 0 families get justice. And she had dangerous people who would eventually figure out she was here. Sophie stirred awake. "Mama?" Jessica forced a smile. "Morning, baby. Are you hungry?" "Yes. Can we have the beef stew one?" "Absolutely." While Sophie ate, Jessica opened the files again, reading through everything. The families, the evidence, the plan Whitmore had developed for distribution. It was thorough, brilliant, even. He'd created a network of lawyers and advocates who could handle the distribution anonymously. He'd prepared legal challenges to the bankruptcy ruling. He'd laid groundwork for restoration. All he'd needed was someone brave enough or desperate enough to finish it. Jessica looked at Sophie, who was drawing pictures of the glacier, completely content in their frozen sanctuary. Her daughter deserved better than this. Deserved warmth and stability, and a life that didn't revolve around survival. 318 million could give her that. But keeping it would mean becoming exactly like Derek, like the judge, like the coastal mining executives who'd stolen from those families. It would mean teaching Sophie that justice only matters when it's convenient, that principles are luxuries the desperate can't afford. Jessica closed the laptop and made a decision. She would finish what Dr. Whitmore started. But first, she needed help. The station's radio room was in surprisingly good condition. Jessica spent 3 hours figuring out how to operate the long-range system and finally managed to get a signal out. "This is Chilkat Research Station, requesting contact with attorney David Chen in Seattle. This is not an emergency. Repeat, not an emergency." She left the Bly message on repeat and went back to Sophie. 2 days later, a response came. "Chilkat Station, this is David Chen. Received your message. How can I help?" Jessica had chosen Chen carefully. He was one of the lawyers Whitmore had listed, someone who'd been trying to help the coastal mining families for years. Someone with a reputation for integrity. Mr. Chen. My name is Jessica Torres. I have information regarding the coastal mining pension theft. Can we speak securely? Of course. There was a long pause. Information regarding what? The missing 318 million. Another pause, longer this time. I'll call you back in 1 hour, on an encrypted line. When Chen called back, Jessica told him everything. The station, the vault, Whitmore's letter, the evidence. She could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. You're telling me you found the money? All of it. Plus, documentation. Miss Torres, do you understand the danger you're in? Dr. Whitmore explained it pretty clearly. Then, you know, that Denali Development has been searching for this for 8 years. They've destroyed people for less. I know. And you still want to proceed? Jessica looked at Sophie, who was organizing their supplies into neat rows, humming softly. Those families deserve their pensions, Mr. Chen. Someone has to make sure they get them. Chen was quiet for a moment. Dr. Whitmore chose well. Okay, here's what we need to do. Over the next week, Chen assembled a team. Lawyers, accountants, former federal prosecutors, journalists, people who'd been waiting years for a chance to bring down Denali Development and restore justice to the coastal mining families. Jessica photographed every document on Whitmore's laptop, uploading them to encrypted servers. She made video statements, recorded everything. If anything happened to her, the information would automatically go public. Mutually assured destruction, just like Whitmore had planned. But getting the money out was the challenge. We can't just helicopter out containers of cash, Chen explained over the radio. Denali has connections at every level. The moment we try to move large amounts, they'll know. So what do? We go public first. We file lawsuits. We release the evidence. We blow up their entire cover-up. Then, when they're defending themselves in court and in the media, we move the money under legal protection. How long will that take? 6 months. Maybe a year. Jessica looked around the station. The generator fuel would last another 6 weeks. The food, maybe 4. The Alaskan winter was deepening, and Tom wouldn't be back for 3 more weeks. Mr. Chen, I don't know if we can stay here that long. Do you have anywhere else to go? Jessica was quiet. She didn't. Going back to Montana meant Derek's jurisdiction, meant judges who'd already ruled against her, meant losing Sophie. No, she said finally. We don't. Then you stay put. I'm working on getting you supplies. Tom Hendricks says he can make an extra trip if we pay his fuel costs. Can you hold out 3 more weeks? Jessica thought about the frozen vault, about Sophie's resilient smile, about the families waiting for justice. We can hold out. 3 weeks turned into 5, when weather delayed Tom's supply run. Jessica rationed food carefully, making every MRE last 2 days instead of 1. She fed Sophie first, always, taking smaller portions for herself. The cold was relentless. Some days, even with the generator, the temperature inside dropped below freezing. They wore every piece of clothing they had, huddling together for warmth. Sophie never complained. She'd become an expert at melting snow for water, at organizing their dwindling supplies, at making games out of their survival. Mama, when the lawyers get the money back to the families, will we be famous? Jessica smiled. I don't think so, baby. We're just helping. That's okay. I don't want to be famous anyway. I just want to stay with you. Jessica pulled her close, tears freezing on her cheeks. You'll always be with me, no matter what. On the 38th day, Tom's helicopter finally appeared. He brought food, fuel, warmer clothes, and news. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, he said, unloading supplies. Chen told me to tell you the lawsuits are filed. It's all over the news. Denali's stock dropped 20% in 2 days. Jessica felt a weight lift from her chest. Did he say anything else? Yeah, he said to sit tight. They're working on extraction plans, but it's complicated. Denali's fighting back hard. They're claiming the money is rightfully theirs through the acquisition, that Whitmore was a thief, that anyone helping is complicit in fraud. But we have evidence. Evidence takes time to process through the courts. Chen says you need to hold out for at least 4 more months. Maybe 6. Jessica's heart sank. 4 more months. Through the deepest part of Alaskan winter, Tom must have seen the despair on her face. I'll come back. Every month. Bring what you need. You're not alone in this. After he left, Jessica stood outside the station, watching the helicopter disappear into grey sky. Sophie was inside, warm and safe. They had food now. They had time. But 4 more months felt like an eternity. That night, unable to sleep, Jessica returned to the vault. She stood among the containers of money, thinking about the families who'd lost their retirements, about the executives who'd stolen without consequence, about Dr. Whitmore, who died trying to make things right. She picked up one of the containers of cash and carried it upstairs. In the light of the common area, she opened it and pulled out a single $100 bill. For 37 years, it had been sitting in that vault, frozen, waiting. Now it would flow back into the world, returning to the people it had been stolen from. Jessica taped the bill to the wall above their makeshift bed. "What's that for?" Sophie asked, watching. "It's a reminder," Jessica said, "that justice is worth waiting for." The months crawled by. Tom came every 4 weeks like clockwork, bringing supplies and updates. Chen's team was winning in court. The evidence was devastating. Executives were being arrested. Politicians who'd taken bribes were resigning. The bankruptcy court was reversing its rulings. But Denali Development was fighting with everything they had. They'd hired the best lawyers, filed countersuits, created delays. They claimed the money was gone, that Whitmore had spent it, that anyone claiming to have it was lying. "They're stalling," Chen told Jessica over the radio. "They think if they drag this out long enough, you'll give up or make a mistake." "I'm not giving up. I know." That's what terrifies them. By month 5, Jessica and Sophie had settled into a strange routine. They'd claimed the station as their own, making it as comfortable as possible. Sophie did schoolwork from books Tom brought. Jessica maintained the station, keeping the generator running. The living spaces habitable. They explored the safe areas during daylight hours. They read books by candlelight. They told stories and played games, and somehow, impossibly, found moments of happiness in their frozen exile. But the isolation was hard. Some days, Jessica would stand at the window, staring at the endless white, and feel the weight of it crushing her chest. They were so far from everything, so vulnerable. If something went wrong, if the generator failed, if a storm trapped them, if one of them got sick, she couldn't think like that. She had to focus on what she could control. On month 6, everything changed. Tom arrived with his regular supply run and news that made Jessica's knees weak. "The judge ruled in your favor," he said, grinning. "Denali's bankruptcy claim has been thrown out. The court has ordered the pension fund restored. All of it." Jessica grabbed Sophie and spun her around. "We did it, baby. We did it." "What did we do?" Sophie asked, laughing. "We helped a lot of people get their money back." Tom's expression grew serious. "But here's the thing. The court needs to verify the money exists. Chen's team is flying up tomorrow with federal marshals to document the vault and prepare it for transport. And Jessica," he paused, "Denali knows where you are now. The court filings revealed the location. Chen says they're likely sending their own people to try to secure the vault first. The marshals need to get here before Denali does." Jessica felt ice run through her veins. "How long do we have?" One. Underbrief. Maybe 24 hours. Maybe less. That night was the longest of Jessica's life. She and Sophie packed everything they might need into bags, ready to run if necessary. She checked the radio constantly, waiting for word from Chen's team. At 3 a.m., she heard something that made her blood freeze. Helicopter rotors. But Tom wasn't scheduled until morning, and Chen's team wasn't due until dawn. Jessica ran to the port window. Through the darkness, she could see lights approaching. Not one helicopter. 3. Sophie, she said calmly. We need to go to the safe room. Now. They'd prepared for this. Tom had shown her a storage room on the far side of the station that could be sealed from inside. They had supplies there. Water, food, a radio. Sophie didn't ask questions. She grabbed her backpack and followed her mother through the dark corridors. They were halfway there when the station door exploded inward. Men poured in, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Professional. Armed. Not police, private security. Find it, a voice commanded. Tear this place apart. Jessica and Sophie pressed against the wall in shadow, barely breathing. The men spread through the station systematically, opening doors, searching rooms. They were heading toward the laboratory where the vault entrance was hidden. Jessica made a split-second decision. She couldn't let them find the vault, not before the marshals arrived. Stay here, she whispered to Sophie. Don't move until I come back. Mama, stay here. Jessica crept back toward the common area. Her heart hammered so hard she thought they'd hear it. She reached the generator room and made her choice. She shut it down. The station plunged into darkness. Men shouted. Flashlights swung wildly. In the chaos, Jessica slipped into the radio room and sent out an emergency distress call. Chilkat Station, under attack. Multiple intruders, requesting immediate assistance. Who's there? A flashlight beam found her. Jessica ran. She knew the station better than they did. She'd spent 6 months learning every corridor, every door, every hiding place. She led them away from Sophie, away from the vault entrance, through the destroyed labs, through the areas where the glacier had pushed through, where the floor was treacherous with ice. Behind her, she heard shouting, footsteps, the crackle of radios. The woman's here. Find her. Jessica ducked into a side room just as her foot hit a patch of ice. She went down hard, her shoulder slamming against frozen concrete. Pain exploded through her arm. She couldn't move it. Footsteps were coming closer. She crawled behind an overturned desk, biting her lip to keep from crying out. The flashlight swept across the room, pausing inches from her hiding spot. Then, from somewhere else in the station, we found it. There's a door in the glacier. The footsteps retreated. Jessica waited until she couldn't hear anything, then dragged herself to her feet. Her arm hung useless at her side. She thought she heard the distant whump-whump of more helicopters. Please be Chen. Please be the marshals. She made it back to Sophie's hiding spot. Her daughter threw herself into Jessica's good arm, crying silently. It's okay, baby. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Not yet. They could hear men in the vault now, shouting in excitement. They'd found the containers. They were loading them. Then, new voices. Authoritative, official. Federal marshals. Drop your weapons. This is a secured crime scene. Gunfire erupted. Jessica covered Sophie with her body, praying as shots echoed through the station. It was over quickly. The security team hadn't expected federal agents. They surrendered, hands raised, as marshals flooded the station. Jessica emerged from hiding, Sophie clinging to her. A marshal approached. Jessica Torres? Yes. David Chen sent us. Are you hurt? Jessica looked down at her useless arm. I think my shoulder's dislocated. We have medics. Come on. As dawn broke over the glacier, Jessica stood outside the station. Her arm in a sling. Sophie beside her, and watched as marshals documented and secured the vault. Tom had arrived with Chen's team. The lawyer approached, looking exhausted but triumphant. "You did it," he said. "The vault's secured. The evidence is protected. Denali's security team is under arrest for breaking and entering, attempting to steal federal evidence. The families," Jessica said, "will they get their money? Every penny, plus interest. The first checks will go out within 60 days. Jessica felt tears freezing on her cheeks. "Dr. Whitmore, did you ever meet him?" Chen nodded. "Once. 3 years ago. He was dying. Couldn't risk coming back. But he made me promise, if I ever found out where the money was, I'd fight for the families. I just never expected." He looked at Jessica with something like awe. "He never expected someone like you to finish it." Over the next week, the station became command central for the largest pension restoration in history. Accountants verified every container. Lawyers prepared distribution plans. Journalists documented everything, and Jessica and Sophie stayed, bearing witness to justice finally being served. Sophie was fascinated by it all. She watched as containers were carefully loaded onto helicopters, as manifests were created, as the faces of lawyers and marshals grew bright with the realization they were part of something historic. "Mama?" she asked one evening. "Are we heroes?" Jessica pulled her close. "No, baby. The heroes are the families who never gave up hope. We just delivered what was already theirs." On the final day, after the last container had been removed and the vault sealed, Chen approached Jessica with papers. "The court has ruled on the finder's fee," he said. "Typically, it's 10%, but given your role in protecting the assets and your cooperation, they've awarded you 5%. That's approximately 15,9 million. Jessica stared at the number. 15,9 million? You earned it. You risked everything. I can't. That's too much. It's not too much, Chen interrupted firmly. You lived in a frozen station for 6 months. You were attacked. You protected evidence that brought down a criminal conspiracy. This money is legally yours. Tax-free. Because it's compensation for recovery of stolen assets. Jessica looked at Sophie. Her daughter needed a home, an education, a future. What do I have to do? Just sign here. That night, in the common area that had been their home, Jessica sat with Sophie and tried to explain. We have money now, baby. Real money. We can buy a house. A warm house with a big yard. You can go to any school you want. We can do anything. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Can we help other people too? Jessica felt her heart swell. What do you mean? Like, we help the families. Can we use the money to help other people who need it? Jessica pulled her daughter close, tears streaming freely. Yes, baby. We can help as many people as we want. The next day, Tom flew them back to civilization. As the helicopter lifted off, Jessica looked down at the Chilkat research station, small and lonely, against the massive glacier. That broken, frozen building had saved them, not just physically, but spiritually. It had given them purpose. It had reminded her that even the most desperate person could make a difference, that justice delayed wasn't justice denied, that good people still existed, and they were worth fighting for. Goodbye, Dr. Whitmore, she whispered. We finished what you started. 6 months later, Jessica stood in the living room of their new house in Missoula, Montana. It was warm. It had big windows that flooded the space with light. Sophie's laughter echoed from upstairs, where she was decorating her new bedroom. On the mantel sat a framed photo of the Chilkat research station. Beside it, the single $100 bill Jessica had taken from the vault, the reminder that justice was worth waiting for. Her phone rang. David Chen. The final distribution went out today, he said. 4,000 families. Every pension restored. plus 12 years of interest. How are people reacting? See for yourself. Check your email. Jessica opened her laptop. Her inbox was flooded. Hundreds of messages from families whose lives had been changed. A grandmother who could finally afford her medications. A man who could retire after working into his 70s. A woman who could pay for her daughter's cancer treatment. One message made her cry. My father worked for coastal mining for 40 years. He died believing he'd failed us. That his pension was gone. Because of you, we finally understand he didn't fail. He was robbed. Thank you for giving us back his dignity. Jessica closed the laptop and looked around her warm, bright home, at the life she'd built from the ashes of her worst moment. Sometimes, the paths that save us don't make sense until we're looking back. Sometimes the answer to impossible questions is hidden in the last place anyone would look. Sometimes justice comes frozen in ice, waiting for someone desperate enough and brave enough to finish what others started. She'd bought an Ozemset research station with her last dollars. She'd found 318 million in a Glacier vault. She'd helped 0 families get justice. And in the process, she'd taught her daughter the most important lesson of all, that wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you give away. Sophie came running downstairs. Mama! Can Lucy come over after school tomorrow? Of course, baby. And Mama? I've been thinking, when I grow up, I want to be a lawyer like Mr. Chen, so I can help people get justice. Jessica pulled her daughter close. Then that's exactly what you'll be. Outside, Montana snow began to fall soft, gentle. Nothing like the harsh Alaskan ice that had sheltered them. But Jessica didn't mind the snow anymore. It reminded her of what they'd survived, what they'd accomplished, what they'd become. The Chilkat research station still stood in the glacier, slowly being reclaimed by ice. But its legacy lived on in every restored pension, every family made whole, every life changed, because one desperate woman refused to give up. And, sometimes, on quiet evenings, Jessica would look at that photo on the mantel and whisper a thank you to Dr. Whitmore, to Tom Hendricks, to David Chen, and to all the good people who'd helped turn disaster into triumph. The meek didn't just inherit the earth. Sometimes, they inherited frozen research stations and turned them into monuments of justice. Sometimes, they proved that one person really could change the world. Sometimes, they showed that the greatest fortune isn't what you find, it's what you do with it once you have it. And sometimes, just sometimes, the coldest place on earth becomes the warmest place in your heart. The first year, after the Chilkat station, passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media interviews, and adjustments to their new reality. Jessica had tried to stay anonymous, but the story was too big. Single mother finds 318 million in Glacier made international headlines. Her face was everywhere. Derek saw those headlines. He called 3 days after the first major news story broke, his voice dripping with false warmth. Jessica, I've been thinking about everything that happened between us. I made mistakes. I want to make things right. For Sophie's sake. Jessica's grip tightened on the phone. You took everything from us. Derek, you left your daughter homeless. I was angry. The divorce, it made me crazy. But I'm in therapy now. I'm different. And Sophie deserves to have her father in her life. What do you really want? His tone shifted, hardened. I deserve half of what you found. We were married when you inherited that station. Community property laws. Jessica hung up. 5 minutes later, David Chen called. Derek filed papers claiming marital interest in the finder's fee. It's complete garbage, legally, but he's going to make noise. Can he win? Not a chance. The station was inherited after your divorce was final. The finder's fee was awarded to you personally for your actions. He has zero claim. But Jessica, Chen paused. He's going to drag this out. Make it ugly. Use Sophie as leverage. Jessica looked at her daughter, who was reading on the couch, finally comfortable and safe. Do whatever you have to do to protect her. The custody battle that followed was brutal. Derek claimed Jessica had exposed Sophie to danger by staying at the station. He brought character witnesses who painted her as unstable, desperate, a bad mother who'd gambled with her child's safety. Jessica's lawyers countered with the truth. Derek had made them homeless. Jessica had found the only shelter she could afford, and in that shelter, she'd done something extraordinary. She'd restored justice to thousands of families. The judge, a woman named Patricia Reeves, listened to 6 weeks of testimony. Then she made her ruling. Mr. Torres, you abandoned your daughter when she needed you most. You left her homeless. You now return only because her mother has means. Your petition for custody is denied. Your petition for financial compensation is denied with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm ordering supervised visitation only, pending completion of parenting classes. Derek's face went purple. This is insane. I'm her father. Judge Reeves stared him down. Then act like one. Court dismissed. Outside the courthouse, Derek cornered Jessica in the parking lot. You think you've won? You think this is over? Jessica met his eyes steadily. It's over, Derek. Move on with your life. That money should be mine. You were nothing when I met you. Nothing. And I'm still me. The money didn't change that. It just gave me the chance to become who I was always meant to be. She walked away, Sophie's hand in hers, and didn't look back. But Derek was just the beginning. 2 months later, a man approached Jessica at Sophie's soccer game. He was well-dressed, professional, with cold eyes that reminded her of the security team at the station. Mrs. Torres, my name is Vincent Carver. I represent certain parties who feel you've made a grave error. Jessica's hand found Sophie's shoulder, pulling her closer. I don't know what you're talking about. The Denali development matter. My clients believe the court ruling was influenced by sentiment rather than law. They're prepared to offer you $5 million to publicly state that you were coerced into supporting the pension restoration. Your clients stole from 4,000 families. The answer is no. Carver's smile was thin. Think carefully, Mrs. Torres. You have a daughter. She goes to Meadowbrook Elementary. She has soccer practice every Tuesday and Thursday. She walks home with Lucy Patterson, whose mother teaches. Jessica stepped forward, her voice dropping to ice. If you or anyone associated with you comes near my daughter, I will destroy you. Do you understand me? I have every piece of evidence from that vault. I have recordings, documents, names. David Chen has instructions to release everything to every media outlet in the country if anything happens to us. Your clients will spend the rest of their lives in prison. You're making a mistake. The only mistake would be underestimating a mother protecting her child. Now leave. Carver left, but Jessica's hands shook for an hour afterward. That night, she called Chen and arranged for security. Private, professional, and invisible. Sophie would never know they were being protected. The threats continued for months. Anonymous letters, suspicious cars outside their house, a break-in attempt that the security team stopped. Jessica refused to be intimidated. Instead, she did something that terrified the people threatening her. She went public. She gave an interview to a major news network, telling the complete story. The homelessness, the station, the vault, Dr. Whitmore's sacrifice, the pension restoration, and she spoke directly to camera about the continuing intimidation from Denali's allies. They think they can silence me with fear, she said. But I've been homeless with my daughter. I've been so scared I couldn't breathe. I've been at rock bottom. And I learned something there. When you have nothing left to lose, you become very, very dangerous to people who have everything. The interview went viral. Public opinion swung overwhelmingly in her favor. Denali's remaining executives were fired. Politicians distanced themselves. The threats stopped. But Jessica knew they'd changed her. She couldn't go back to being the woman who'd slept in her car, hoping no one would notice her desperation. That woman was gone, transformed by ice and justice, and the terrible knowledge of what she was capable of. Sophie noticed. "Mama, you're different now." "Different how, baby?" "Stronger, like you could fight a bear and win." Jessica laughed. "I don't know about bears." "I do. You're the strongest person I know." With the threats managed and Derek contained, Jessica turned her attention to something that had been growing in her mind since the day they'd left Alaska. She established the Whitmore Foundation with $10 of her finder's fee. Its mission: helping families in crisis, specifically single mothers who'd been failed by the system. The foundation paid rent for families facing eviction. It provided legal services for women fighting corrupt divorce proceedings. It created emergency funds for unexpected medical bills, car repairs, the little disasters that could spiral into complete destruction. But more than money, the foundation provided something Jessica had desperately needed during her darkest days: someone who believed them. She hired advocates who'd been through similar struggles, women who'd slept in their cars, who'd fought impossible legal battles, who'd rebuilt their lives from nothing. They understood that sometimes people didn't need advice, they needed someone to fight alongside them. The foundation's first client was Maria Gonzalez, a woman whose story mirrored Jessica's. Abusive husband, stolen assets, a system that protected the wrong person. Jessica met with her personally. "Tell me everything." Maria broke down, telling a story of manipulation, gaslighting, and calculated cruelty. Her husband had hidden assets, claimed poverty, and turned her own family against her. "Everyone thinks I'm lying," Maria sobbed. "Even my lawyer barely believes me." Jessica knew that feeling. "I believe you, and we're going to prove them all wrong." The foundation hired forensic accountants who uncovered her husband's hidden accounts. They brought in lawyers who fought like wolves. 6 months later, Maria had full custody of her children and a settlement that reflected reality rather than her ex-husband's lies. "You saved us," Maria told Jessica at the final hearing. "No," Jessica said. "You saved yourself. I just made sure you had the tools to do it." The foundation grew rapidly. Within 2 years, they'd helped 847 families. The success stories piled up: children who stayed with protective parents, women who escaped with their lives, families who avoided homelessness. But the work was hard. Jessica heard so many stories that mirrored her own nightmare. She cried with women who'd lost everything. She raged at a system that consistently failed the vulnerable. Sophie, now 10 years old, began volunteering at the foundation after school. She'd organize donation drives, help younger kids with homework, sit quietly with families waiting for their advocate meetings. "Why do you like coming here?" Jessica asked her one day. Sophie thought about it carefully. "Because these people remind me of us. Before Alaska. When we were scared, but trying to be brave. I want them to know they're not alone." Jessica pulled her daughter close, overwhelmed with pride. "You're going to change the world, baby. We're going to change it together, Mama." On the 3rd anniversary of finding the vault, David Chen called with unexpected news. "There's someone who wants to meet you. Says it's about Dr. Whitmore." Jessica's heart clenched. Who? His daughter, Rebecca Whitmore. She didn't know what her father had done until the news broke. "She wants to. Thank you." They met at a coffee shop in Seattle. Rebecca was in her 40s, with her father's intelligent eyes and the same weight of sadness Jessica had seen in his video. "I thought my father was a coward," Rebecca said quietly. "He disappeared from my life in 2015. No explanation, no goodbye. I was so angry. I thought he'd abandoned us." "He was protecting you," Jessica said. "The people after that money would have used you to get to him. I know that now. But I spent 8 years hating him." Rebecca's voice cracked. "He died alone because he loved me enough to stay away." Jessica reached across the table, taking her hand. "He didn't die alone. He died knowing he'd done the right thing, knowing that eventually someone would finish what he started." "Thank you," Rebecca whispered. "Thank you for proving my father wasn't crazy, that he was a hero." They talked for 3 hours. Rebecca shared stories of her father, before the pension theft, before the paranoia and fear. A brilliant man who loved puzzles, who'd taught her to see patterns in everything, who'd believed absolutely in doing what was right, regardless of cost. "He would have liked you," Rebecca said. "You're as stubborn as he was." "I don't know about stubborn. Desperate, maybe. Sometimes desperate and stubborn look the same." Before they parted, Rebecca gave Jessica a small box. "I found this in his storage unit. I think he meant for you to have it." Inside was a compass, old and well-worn. A note was taped to it. "For whoever finishes the journey, may you always know which direction is true." Jessica carried that compass everywhere. Sophie graduated elementary school with honors. She gave a speech at her promotion ceremony about perseverance, about how her mother had taught her that giving up was never an option. 3 years ago, we were homeless," she said to an auditorium of shocked parents. "We slept in a car. We didn't know where our next meal would come from. But my mom never stopped fighting. She never stopped believing things would get better. And now, we help other families like we were, because nobody should face what we faced alone." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Jessica cried through all of it. That summer, they returned to Alaska. Tom Hendricks flew them up to the Chilkat station. One more time, the glacier had advanced further. Part of the station was now completely encased in ice. In another decade, it would be gone entirely, absorbed by the mountain. Jessica and Sophie walked through the remaining accessible sections. The common area where they'd lived. The corridor where Jessica had run from Denali's security team. The vault entrance, now sealed by the government. "Does it feel different?" Sophie asked. Jessica considered. "It feels smaller. Like maybe it was never as big and scary as I remembered. Or maybe we got bigger. Maybe that's it." They stood outside, looking at the glacier that had saved and nearly killed them. Tom took their photo, the two of them against the vast white expanse. "What are you thinking?" Tom asked. "That this place taught me something I'd forgotten," Jessica said. "That I was strong enough. That I'd always been strong enough. I just needed to remember." Before they left, Jessica left something behind. She'd brought Dr. Whitmore's compass, and she buried it in a cairn of stones near the station entrance. "What was that for?" Sophie asked. "So he can keep guiding people home," Jessica said, "even after we're gone." 5 years after finding the vault, the last of Denali Development's executives were sentenced. The pension restoration was complete. The families had their money. Justice, delayed but not denied, had finally arrived. Jessica stood at a memorial service for the workers who died before seeing their pensions restored. Families shared stories of parents and grandparents who'd worked their entire lives only to be cheated at the end. An elderly woman approached Jessica afterward. "My husband died 10 years ago. He worked for coastal mining for 43 years. He died believing he'd failed us, that his pension was gone. Because of you, I finally got to tell my grandchildren their grandfather was a good man who was stolen from, not a failure. Thank you for giving us that." Jessica thought about all the paths that had led to this moment. Derek's betrayal, the Osimset station, the frozen vault, Dr. Whitmore's sacrifice, Sophie's resilience. Every choice, every hardship, every moment of despair had been necessary to reach this point. She didn't regret any of it. Not the fear, not the cold, not the danger, because it had all led to this: justice for thousands, and a daughter who understood that the world could be cruel, but people could be kind. That night, Sophie, now 12 and already taller than her mother, sat with Jessica on their back porch, watching fireflies dance in the warm Montana evening. "Mama, do you ever miss Alaska? The station?" Jessica thought. About it. Sometimes. Not the cold or the fear, but the feeling that we were doing something important, that we mattered. We still matter. The foundation helps people every day. You're right. I guess I miss the simplicity. It was just us against the world. Sophie leaned against her mother. It's still us against the world. We just have better backup now. Jessica laughed. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. Years turned into a decade. Sophie graduated high school, then college with a degree in social work. She joined the Whitmore Foundation full-time, bringing energy and innovation to their programs. Jessica watched her daughter lead intake meetings with families in crisis, and saw herself in those early, desperate days. But she also saw something she'd never had. Sophie had never lost her belief that the world could be better. Jessica had found that belief in a frozen vault. Sophie had been born with it. The foundation expanded. They opened offices in 5 states. They created programs for job training, affordable housing, legal advocacy. They partnered with other organizations fighting for families in crisis. And quietly, with the last of her finder's fee, Jessica established a scholarship fund for children of single parents. Full ride to any college, no strings attached. 50 students a year, 500 over a decade, 5,000 over a lifetime. Each recipient received a letter. This scholarship exists because someone once gave me a chance when I had nothing. Now I'm giving you the same chance. Use it well. Then help someone else. That's how we change the world, one person at a time. On the 15th anniversary of finding the vault, Jessica received a letter from the federal government. They were decommissioning the weather monitoring program in the Chilkat Range. The research station would be officially abandoned, left to the glacier's mercy. "Do you want to buy it back?" Chen asked, half joking. "Full circle?" Jessica laughed. "I think once was enough." But she did return one final time. Tom, now in his 70s but still flying, took her up. The station was barely recognizable. The glacier had claimed 3/4 of it. Ice pressed through walls like slow-motion explosions. Only the west wing remained partially accessible. Jessica walked through the common area where she and Sophie had survived that first terrible winter. Snow had blown in through broken windows. The generator was silent, long since defunct. But the walls still stood. The space that had sheltered them still existed, fighting against the ice's relentless advance. She found the spot where they'd slept, where she'd taped that $100 bill as a reminder. The bill was gone, taken by wind or wildlife. But the tape remained, a small mark of their presence. Jessica pulled out a marker and wrote on the wall. Jessica and Sophie Torres stayed here. 2024-2025. We survived. We helped others survive. We mattered. Then she walked out, leaving the station to its fate. Some things were meant to be temporary. Some shelters were only meant to last until you were strong enough to build something permanent. The Chilkat Research Station had served its purpose. Now, it could rest, slowly returning to the ice that had hidden its greatest secret. Jessica returned to Montana, to her warm house and her thriving foundation, and her daughter who'd grown into a force for change in her own right. Sophie met her at the airport. "How was it?" "Perfect," Jessica said. "It's time to let it go." "Are you sad?" "No, baby. I'm grateful." That night, Jessica stood in her office at the foundation, looking at the wall of photographs. Families they'd helped, lives they'd changed, futures they'd secured. In the center was the photo from that last trip to Alaska. Her and Sophie against the glacier, both smiling, both free. Beside it hung Dr. Whitmore's letter, and the photo Rebecca had given her of James Whitmore before the pension theft, before the fear, when he was just a scientist who believed in doing what was right. Jessica touched the photo gently. "We did it. We finished what you started. Those families have their pensions, their dignity, their future, and we built something that will keep helping long after we're gone." She imagined she heard his voice. "Well done." The Chilkat research station disappeared completely in 2041, consumed by the advancing glacier. Scientists noted its loss as a minor footnote in climate change studies, just another structure reclaimed by ice. But the 318 million it had hidden changed thousands of lives. The foundation it inspired helped tens of thousands more. The example it set, that one desperate person could make a difference, inspired countless others to fight for justice. Jessica Torres lived to be 87. She never remarried, never sought fame, never stopped fighting for families in crisis. When she died, surrounded by Sophie and 3 grandchildren, her last words were, "Tell them to look up, always look up." Sophie understood. Her mother wasn't talking about heaven, or hope, or any simple platitude. She was talking about the glacier, about looking up at an impossible mountain and deciding to climb it anyway. She was talking about seeing beyond your current circumstances to what you could become. She was talking about the courage to keep going when giving up would be so much easier. The Whitmore Foundation continues today, run by Sophie Torres Chen and her daughter Emma. They help more than 10,000 families a year. They've changed laws, influenced policy, created systemic change that protects vulnerable families. But the Foundation's origin story remains its most powerful tool. When families come in desperate and broken, advocates share Jessica's story. The single mother who bought an Osimset research station and found justice frozen in a glacier. If she could survive that, they say, you can survive this. And they believe it. Because Jessica Torres proved that rock bottom isn't the end. Sometimes it's the launching pad for something extraordinary. Sometimes the coldest place you've ever been becomes the forge where you're transformed into someone unbreakable. Sometimes losing everything is the first step to finding what really matters. The glacier that held the vault still stands in Alaska, indifferent to human concerns, slowly reshaping the mountain. The money is long gone, distributed to those who earned it. But the legacy remains. In every family helped. In every child who grows up with stability instead of chaos. In every woman who fights back against a system designed to defeat her. That's the real treasure. Not the 318 million in ice, but the proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to surrender. Jessica Torres was never a hero. She was just a mother trying to save her daughter. But in doing so, she saved thousands of families and showed the world what justice looks like when it's frozen, protected, and finally set free. Her story belongs to everyone who's ever slept in their car, wondering how they'll survive tomorrow. To everyone who's been knocked down and had to decide whether to stay down or get back up. To everyone who stood at the bottom of an impossible mountain and chosen to climb. The glacier remembers. The families remember. The world remembers. And somewhere in Montana, in an office filled with photographs of lives changed and futures secured, Jessica's legacy continues, one family at a time, one crisis resolved, One more person discovering they're stronger than they ever imagined. That's the ending to this story. Not dramatic or cinematic, but real and lasting and true. Because the best endings aren't about happiness or wealth or revenge. They're about becoming who you were always meant to be, then using that strength to help others become who they're meant to be. That's justice. That's legacy. That's what happens when someone desperate enough and brave enough decides that giving up simply isn't an option. Jessica Torres found 318 million in a Glacier. But her real fortune was discovering that she'd had the strength all along. She just needed the right crisis to reveal it. And in the end, that made all the difference.